Judge messed with the wrong black woman, tried to outsmart her. What happens next is insane. They say the scales of justice always balance in the end, but what if a powerful judge tried to tip them in his favor? In this story, we follow Camilla Carter, a determined black woman with everything to lose and a lifetime of resilience built into her bones. When an arrogant, corrupt judge sets his sights on crushing Camilla's spirit and taking her home, her savings, even her future, he's convinced she won't fight back. But Naomi has a secret weapon, an unwavering belief in her worth and a knack for uncovering hidden truths. Brace yourself for betrayal, courtroom showdowns, and karma that strikes so hard it leaves everyone stunned. Camilla Carter parked her aging silver sedan under the shade of an ancient oak just outside her mother's modest home in southwest Atlanta. A worn mailbox by the curb bore the name Carter in peeling letters, evoking memories of sun-drenched childhood summers. Camilla could still recall running up and down the sidewalk with chalk in hand, playing hopscotch, and waving to neighbors who felt more like extended family. But the warmth of those memories was overshadowed by the legal summons she clutched in her hand. She had received it earlier in the day at work, a knock on the office door, the unexpected visit from a process server, and a sealed envelope with her name printed in bold. It contained a court order that seemed bizarre at first glance, an accusation that the Carter family property violated local zoning and safety codes. To Camilla, who prided herself on her methodical nature and near-obsessive attention to detail, the allegations sounded manufactured. Inside, her elderly mother, Harriet Carter, was settled in an armchair, crocheting a blanket. Harriet's eyes lifted when Camilla entered, and she knew instantly something was wrong. Her daughter's face was tight with worry. Harriet set aside her crocheting, old fingers trembling. Camilla explained the summons, reading the legal jargon out loud in a calm, measured voice, though her heart pounded. It was more than a zoning dispute. It threatened fines so high they'd lose the house outright. The accusations stretched from unsafe wiring to improper fence height. Harriet's home wasn't perfect, its paint had chipped, and the roof squeaked in heavy rain, but it was hardly a structural danger. These claims are insane, Camilla concluded, frustration dripping from her voice. Why now, after all these years? We've been here since before I was born. You paid off the mortgage. The taxes are up to date. Harriet exhaled. It's got to be those developers. They keep snooping around, offering to buy me out so they can build a new complex here. I told them no. This might be their way of forcing me off my land. Camilla fisted her hands. She worked as an administrative assistant at a small local law firm, so she was no stranger to petty legal tactics. But something about the summons felt more sinister. Her eyes roamed the official letterhead, noticing a particular signature, Judge Lawrence Hopkins. She'd heard the name before. He was notorious for making rulings that favored big-money real estate companies. She'd never encountered him directly, yet the stories swirling around the courthouse were rarely flattering. "What do we do, baby?" Harriet asked quietly, searching her daughter's eyes. Camilla resolved right then that no matter the challenge, she wasn't about to let some shady judge take away her mother's home. "We fight," she said simply, "and we don't back down." She took out her phone and dialed the number of a friend who was interning at the Fulton County Courthouse, determined to uncover exactly who had orchestrated these ridiculous claims. At that moment, the old house's weathered exterior and Harriet's worried expression lit a fuse of righteous fury within Camilla. This wasn't just about one property. It was about defending the life her family had built, a life she refused to see bulldozed by greed. Later that evening, Camila walked the length of the narrow hallway leading to her childhood bedroom. She let her fingers brush against the yellowing wallpaper, remembering how she'd once taped a poster of the Atlanta skyline beside her bed, dreaming of city lights and success. She had spent a lifetime forging her own path, from excelling in high school to joining a community college's paralegal program when her family couldn't afford a full university. Yet, Harriet's influence remained strong. Her mother had always placed an emphasis on dignity, self-sufficiency, and the belief that even modest circumstances could breed greatness. That old house stood as a testament to Harriet's hard work. She had purchased it after working 2 jobs as a hospital orderly and a laundry clerk. Whenever Camila felt the walls were closing in, she reminded herself of Harriet's sacrifices, which never felt burdensome to her mother, only an act of love. Camila sat on her childhood bed, scanning the official summons for the 100th time. Every line seemed more ludicrous. Property line encroaching on county easement, potentially hazardous wiring, unapproved water heater installation. Each accusation was vague but carried heavy penalties. She was certain a powerful developer had orchestrated these claims, funneling them through a shady inspector to feed a lawsuit. But the biggest red flag was Judge Hopkins's involvement from the start. Typically, minor code violations went to small claims or city compliance boards, not directly to a superior court judge who commanded a fearsome reputation. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from dark thoughts. It was her friend, Helena Green, a clerk's assistant at Fulton County Courthouse. Camila answered quickly. "I've seen this kind of thing a couple of times," Helena said, voice hushed. "A big law firm or developer files a nuisance suit, then funnel it to a judge who's, let's just say, friendly to their cause. Hopkins is well known for it. Legally, it's all borderline, but these suits often end in settlement or foreclosure because people are scared to fight." Camila's hand tightened around the phone. "Then I'll fight. How do I stop this?" There was a pause. "You'll need evidence that these claims are baseless. Then you can argue the lawsuit is malicious. Maybe even connect it to whoever's paying for it. But watch your back. Hopkins plays dirty. And the developer's attorneys? They have resources." Camila felt a surge of determination. Let them have resources. She had an entire community behind her, the same neighborhood that raised her, comforted her through heartbreaks, and cheered her successes. She also had her own newfound knowledge of the legal system, and if that wasn't enough, she had a righteous fury that refused to let Harriet lose her home. After the call ended, Camila stared out her bedroom window at the quiet street. Tomorrow, she would begin building her defense, step by meticulous step. She didn't know it yet, but in unraveling the threads of this case, she would expose a network of corruption larger than she ever imagined, with Judge Lawrence Hopkins at the center, a man who seriously underestimated the woman he'd just declared legal war upon. Early the next morning, Camila brewed a pot of coffee and set about calling a handful of trusted neighbors. It wasn't long before her phone lit up with messages of support. Word spread quickly on the block. Harriet Carter's home was under attack. By noon, a few residents had gathered on the Carter porch, fans in hand, to stave off the relentless Georgia heat. There was Miss Washington, whose father had built their house in the 1950s, Mr. Jackson, a longtime friend of the family with a booming voice perfect for community activism, and several others who'd known Harriet for decades. They brought iced tea, homemade cookies, and unwavering loyalty. "We've seen these developers circle before," Miss S. Washington said, shaking her head. "They made me an offer last spring, but I wasn't about to hand over my home for a cheap check." Mr. Jackson nodded fervently. "This whole side of Atlanta is prime real estate now. We all know they want to turn it into condos or high-end apartments. That's why they're harassing Harriet. Camila thanked each of them for coming. Her heart swelled at the show of solidarity. They're counting on us not knowing our rights, she said, voice steady but passionate. They think we'll just roll over. But we won't. We'll put up a fight. Miss S. Washington patted Harriet's shoulder. Anything you need, sugar, just say the word. With that reassurance, Camila explained her plan, gather evidence of the property's compliance, compile testimonies from neighbors, and ensure they had documented maintenance records. The group agreed to help in any way they could. As evening approached, the porch lights glowed softly, illuminating Harriet's face as she gazed at Camila. "Look at all this support," she said quietly, tears threatening to spill. "Your father would be proud." Camila felt her chest tighten. Her father had passed away years ago, but she felt his presence now, an unwavering sense of strength and familial pride. Squeezing Harriet's hand, she replied, "We're a community, Ma. That's all we need." The rest of the night she spent poring over old receipts and inspection records, searching for any ammunition that could prove the lawsuit was fraudulent. She found installation papers for the water heater, each properly stamped by the city. She located receipts for electrical upgrades Harriet had done 2 years ago. Carefully, she organized these documents into a binder, each piece of paper a shield against the allegations. But she knew documentation alone might not be enough. Stories whispered through the local legal circles that Judge Hopkins had a penchant for making evidence disappear or for discrediting legitimate paperwork with technicalities. If the system was rigged from the bench, then the fight would be uphill. Still, Camila felt buoyed by the unwavering support around her. As she drifted off to a fitful sleep in her childhood bedroom, she vowed silently, "They've messed with the wrong woman." Little did she know, the days ahead would bring intimidation, betrayal, and a maelstrom of secrets that no one in the neighborhood, least of all Camila, saw coming. A few days later, Camila left Harriet's home before dawn, heading downtown to the Fulton County Courthouse. She'd arranged to meet Helena Green in a nearby cafe, hoping to glean any insider knowledge that might help. She wore a simple black pantsuit and low heels enough to look professional, but not draw too much attention. The city was waking up as she navigated the busy streets. Window washers cleaned glass skyscrapers, morning joggers zipped through crosswalks, and food trucks opened for the breakfast rush. Camila arrived at the cafe and spotted Helena in a corner booth, wearing a grey cardigan and sipping a latte. "Camila, over here," Helena called softly, waving her hand. They exchanged greetings, and Helena's expression turned serious immediately. "Hopkins is dangerous, Camila," she warned. "He's been presiding over property disputes for years, always siding with developers. Rumor has it he's taking bribes, though no one's proven it." Camila leaned in. "Bribes? Are there records?" Helena bit her lip. "Not that I know of. He's smart, he covers his tracks. But there might be patterns in the rulings. I can pull some dockets for you, show you how many property cases he oversaw and how they ended." Camila nodded. "That would be huge. Anything to prove a pattern." Helena looked around nervously. "I'll have to do it quietly. If anyone finds out I'm leaking dockets, I could lose my job. But I'll help. Just be careful with whatever you find." A surge of gratitude and guilt swept through Camila. She knew Helena was risking her career. "I'll keep you out of it," she promised. "And I owe you big time." After a quick hug, Helena left for the courthouse. Camila paid for their coffees and glanced at her phone, noticing a text from a number she didn't recognize. It read, "Drop the case or watch your family suffer." Her stomach lurched. She quickly exited the cafe, heart pounding. She'd expected intimidation, but the bluntness of the threat rattled her. Was it from the developer's lawyer, one of the judge's goons? She had no way to know. Standing on the sidewalk, she forced herself to breathe. She typed a reply, "Who is this?" No answer came. Instead of panicking, Camilla felt a flare of anger. If they thought she would back down because of cowardly messages, they didn't know her at all. She dialed Harriet to make sure her mother was safe. Harriet answered with a warm, "Hello?" Camilla breathed a bit easier. "Just checking in, Ma. Everything okay?" "Yes, baby. I'm at home, feeding the birds." "You sound worried." Camilla forced cheer into her voice. "I'm fine. Just wanted to hear your voice. I'll be back soon." Hanging up, Camilla steeled herself. Fear might be the very weapon they used to dismantle weak defenses. But she wasn't weak. She was more determined than ever to unearth the truth. She spent the next hour wandering downtown, letting the city's bustle distract her. Finally, with Helena's dockets looming in her mind, she headed back to Harriet's place. She needed to make sure every single scrap of evidence was organized to fight the looming court date. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a direct link tying Judge Hopkins to shady developer deals. That night, however, she would realize that enemies lurked in unexpected corners, and that the darkest secrets might be far closer than she ever anticipated. The following evening, Helena made good on her promise. She emailed Camilla a series of court documents, public records from property disputes overseen by Judge Hopkins over the past 2 years. Camilla's heart hammered with anticipation as she opened the files on her laptop. She sat in Harriet's dimly lit living room, the soft hum of cicadas drifting in from outside. Row after row of case numbers appeared on her screen, each followed by the case name, key parties involved, and final judgments. She scanned them, looking for a pattern. Her eyes picked up on repeated names, certain law firms that consistently represented developers. She cross-referenced them with the final rulings. Nearly all had ended in favor of the developer. A swirl of shock and anger coursed through her. It wasn't proof of corruption by itself. Judges could have patterns based on conservative or liberal interpretations of property law. But these numbers were extreme, heavily skewed, and suspicious. Then she saw something that truly made her pause, a specific company name that kept popping up under different LLCs, Palisade Horizons. Camilla typed the name into a search engine and found minimal public information, just a nondescript corporate website. But each time Palisade Horizons appeared in the records, the property dispute ended in foreclosure or forced sale, effectively transferring ownership to the developer. Camilla sipped a mug of tea, her mind racing. If she could link Palisade Horizons to the group that had tried to buy Harriet's property, she might have a lead. She rummaged through Harriet's old mail until she found a business card from a slick salesman who had once offered to take the old house off your hands. The card read, "Brightline Real Estate Solutions, a Palisade Horizons subsidiary." "There it is," she whispered, adrenaline surging. The same group had targeted Harriet. The same group consistently won cases under Hopkins. She opened an old folder titled Local News Clippings that her mother kept, a hobby Harriet had maintained over the years. Flipping through articles about new developments in Atlanta, she spotted mention of Palisade Horizons acquiring land to build upscale condos. In one piece from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the journalist hinted at insider political connections. Camilla's laptop pinged with an incoming email from Helena again. "Be careful. Word is traveling. People are asking questions about who accessed these dockets." Fear mingled with resolve. Camilla shut her eyes, taking a moment to center herself. She wasn't just up against a judge with a preference for developers. She was up against a well-funded machine, an entire corporate entity with potential ties to city officials. She compiled her findings into a digital folder labeled Corruption Evidence, making backups on a flash drive and a cloud service. The last thing she wanted was to lose everything to a convenient computer crash or burglary. The old house groaned as the night set in deeper. Harriet had gone to bed hours ago, her gentle snores floating down the hallway. Outside, a street lamp flickered. Camilla's nerves prickled at every noise, half expecting some stranger to appear at the window. But no one came that night. Instead, Camilla's mind was left to churn through the labyrinth of deceit. If Hopkins was truly on Palisade Horizon's payroll, exposing him would require airtight proof. Otherwise, Harriet's home and the homes of countless others would remain easy prey. Camilla clicked off her laptop and whispered into the dark, "You picked the wrong people to bully." 2 weeks later, the official court date for Harriet's hearing approached. Camilla arranged for Harriet to stay with a relative on the other side of town the night before, ensuring she'd be calm and rested for the stressful day ahead. Camilla herself was anything but calm. She'd barely slept, her brain clogged with legal documents, strategies, and contingency plans. The morning of the hearing arrived warm and humid, a typical Atlanta summer day. Camilla guided her mother through the imposing marble hallways of the Fulton County Courthouse. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, reflecting off polished floors, giving the place an almost regal air. Harriet squeezed Camilla's hand, both seeking reassurance and offering it. They entered courtroom 3B, a modest space with rows of wooden benches and a raised bench at the front. Judge Lawrence Hopkins wasn't yet in his seat, but Camilla recognized the developer's counsel sitting at the plaintiff's table. A lean, sharp-suited attorney named Victor Hall, known for his no-holds-barred courtroom tactics, busied himself with a stack of documents. Camilla and Harriet took their seats at the defense table, accompanied by a local lawyer friend, Simone Russell, who'd agreed to represent them pro bono after hearing about Harriet's predicament. Camilla had shared her collected evidence with Simone, though they both knew the significance of presenting it in open court. They had to be strategic, or Hopkins might dismiss it on technical grounds. As the clock hit 10, a side door opened. In walked Judge Hopkins, black robes flowing. He was in his mid-50s, salt and pepper hair combed back meticulously. The hush that fell over the room was palpable. Camilla studied him, trying to read his face for any trace of guilt or cunning. "All rise," intoned the bailiff. Once everyone was seated, Hopkins scanned the room, his gaze lingering a fraction longer on Camilla than was typical. She stiffened. Victor Hall rose and presented his opening remarks. Harriet Carter's property posed numerous code violations, each meticulously documented by a licensed inspector. In his theatrical style, Hall claimed Harriet's negligence endangered the entire neighborhood. Simone stood next, methodically breaking down each accusation. Harriet had receipts and city inspection certificates that contradicted the claims. Each violation was either already addressed or blatantly falsified. Yet Hopkins displayed an unsettling lack of reaction. He merely nodded, occasionally scribbling notes, his expression a mask of neutrality. Then it was Camilla's turn to testify about the property's condition. She described how Harriet kept the house well maintained. She referenced the suspicious sales pitches and threats, her voice unwavering despite her pounding heart. At one point, she risked a glance at Hopkins. His lips were pressed tight, eyes cold. During cross-examination, Victor Hall tried to paint Harriet as senile and Camilla as overreaching. "You're not a licensed attorney, are you, Miss Carter? So these so-called documents you gathered aren't exactly in your professional capacity, right?" he asked in a mocking tone. Camilla set her jaw. "I have a paralegal certificate. I know how to research and file. These documents are official. That's what matters." Hall muttered, turning his attention to the judge, who offered no comment. Shortly after, Hopkins called for a recess. As he exited the courtroom, Camilla caught a smirk barely there, but chilling enough to confirm her worst suspicions. The message was clear. I'm the one in control here, and you stand no chance. Camilla's stomach twisted with dread. She thought of the reams of evidence about Palisade Horizons, the suspicious rulings, the questionable corporate structure. She hoped Simone's plan to introduce it wouldn't be blocked. Without it, Harriet might be at the mercy of a system designed to crush people like them. Stepping into the hallway for a breath of fresh air, Camilla whispered to herself, "We've come too far to lose now." In that moment, she had no idea just how ferocious the judge's response would be or the lengths to which the opposition would go to silence her. During the recess, Camilla decided to grab a coffee from the courthouse vending machine. Harriet and Simone stood near a bench, quietly reviewing notes. The hallway buzzed with lawyers and clients, awaiting their hearings. As Camilla fed a few crumpled bills into the machine, she sensed a presence behind her. A male voice, low and threatening, said, "You have no idea what you're doing, little girl." Her entire body stiffened. Slowly, she turned. Victor Hall stood inches away, his eyes narrowed. A cold smile twisted his lips. "I'm well aware of what I'm doing," Camilla replied, though her pulse spiked. Hall leaned closer. "You dig any deeper, you'll regret it. This is bigger than just one house. We have resources you can't imagine. Your mother could lose a lot more than a roof over her head." Camilla's stomach churned. "Are you threatening me?" He gave a mocking chuckle. "Threatening? No, I'm just concerned for your welfare. People who stir the pot sometimes get burned. Back down, sign the settlement, and maybe your mother can keep a little money for a condo in another neighborhood." Camilla glared at him, adrenaline sizzling through her veins. "I'd rather face 1,000 attorneys than let you bully my mother. So take your condo and stuff it." Hall's false grin slipped. "Suit yourself," he said, stepping away. "But don't say I didn't warn you." She clenched her fists, watching him vanish into the crowd. The brazen intimidation confirmed her suspicions. Whatever the developer, Palisade Horizons, or Judge Hopkins stood to gain was massive. If it was just about Harriet's small property, they wouldn't be pulling out all the stops. When she returned to Harriet and Simone, she relayed the conversation. Simone's expression darkened. "If he tries that again, we'll file harassment charges. But for now, let's keep cool. We have a bigger battle in that courtroom." Camilla nodded, though her composure wavered. "I won't let them scare me." Just then, her phone buzzed a text from Helena. "Can you talk?" Camilla excused herself and found a quiet corner near the restrooms. Dialing Helena's number, she whispered into the phone, "What's up?" Helena's voice was urgent. "I can't say much, but I overheard a conversation. Judge Hopkins might try to declare the evidence you gathered inadmissible, claiming it's irrelevant or improperly obtained. He's working with Hall to ensure you never show those property rulings in court." Camilla's heart sank. "So they're going to kill our defense before we can even bring it up?" "Exactly." "I'm so sorry. I need to get back before they notice I'm gone, but thought you should know. Thanks, Helena. You're a lifesaver." She ended the call, her mind churning. If Hopkins blocked their evidence, Harriet would lose. Plain and simple. She stalked back toward Simone, who listened, lips pursed. Then Simone said quietly, "We have to make it part of Harriet's direct defense. Argue that the entire lawsuit is part of a pattern of malicious prosecution led by the same developers who bribed Hopkins. That'll force it onto the record." Camilla's anxiety warred with relief. There was still a chance to make it known, but the risk was high. If Hopkins dismissed their claim or found them in contempt for slandering the court, it could backfire spectacularly. "Let's do it," Camilla finally said, voice trembling but resolute. We can't win by playing safe. With the decision made, they watched the clock. The recess would end in minutes. They'd go back into the lion's den, but this time they had a hidden blade of truth. If they played it right, it might just pierce the armor of a corrupt judge and his corporate enablers. When recess concluded, the courtroom settled back into a hush. Judge Hopkins took his seat, rapping his gavel once. "We'll continue with the evidence phase," he announced, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Miss Russell, you may proceed on behalf of the defense." Simone rose and cleared her throat. "Your Honor, we have documents that prove the alleged code violations are baseless. Additionally, we have evidence suggesting that the plaintiff, Palisade Horizons, via counsel from Mr. Hall, has a pattern of filing malicious lawsuits under your courtroom's jurisdiction." Victor Hall shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is an outrageous claim, irrelevant to the matter at hand." Camilla's chest tightened as she watched Hopkins. If he sided with Hall, they'd be muzzled. But Simone pressed on. "Your Honor, the foundation of the plaintiff's case rests on these supposed violations. We believe they are part of a broader scheme. If so, we must present the context." Hopkins' steely gaze flicked from Simone to Camilla, then to Hall. A tense moment passed. Finally he said, "I'll allow you to proceed briefly. But I warn you, counsel, keep it strictly related to this property or risk contempt." Camilla saw Simone's shoulders relax slightly. She set down a stack of papers, referencing case numbers, all featuring Palisade Horizons and culminating in forced sales under Hopkins' rulings. Each time, the property was acquired by the developer at a fraction of its market value. Simone hammered the point. The same law firm that represents the plaintiff today handled those cases. The pattern is compelling. Victor Hall paced anxiously, face pinched in anger. "These are separate matters, Your Honor. Relitigating them is an abuse of the court's time." But Simone wasn't done. She held up a printout of a property transaction. "We also have reason to believe that Palisade Horizons has financially benefited individuals responsible for adjudicating these claims." A hush fell. Camilla held her breath. This was the bombshell moment, the delicate step toward exposing Hopkins. Before Simone could elaborate, the judge struck his gavel violently. "Miss Russell, enough. You will not accuse officers of this court without substantial evidence. I see nothing here that implicates me or this court in any wrongdoing. You're on thin ice." Simone's voice trembled, but she pressed on, referencing the transaction records Camilla had found. "Your Honor, we request the opportunity to subpoena financial documents, including records that might show undue influence or bribes." The tension in the courtroom rose to a fever pitch. Hopkins' face darkened, and for the first time, Camilla sensed raw fury seething beneath his calm facade. He slammed the gavel again. "I will not allow this hearing to devolve into baseless allegations." The defense is overstepping. Across the aisle, Victor Hall looked smug, as if victory was assured. Camilla's mind churned, and she quickly scribbled a note for Simone. "Push for the recorded inspection. Show the judge we have direct refutation of the code violations first." Simone nodded subtly. Clearing her throat, she switched tactics. "Fine. Let's look at the immediate evidence regarding Harriet Carter's home. Our licensed inspector documented the property is up to code. Here is her statement and official city records." Camilla watched Hopkins closely. He flicked through the papers Simone handed to a court clerk. For a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing, his cold gaze lingering on the evidence. Then he set them down and turned to Harriet, who sat quietly near Camilla. "Miss Carter," he intoned, "you've heard the allegations. How do you respond?" Harriet stood, her voice soft but clear. "Your Honor, I've lived in that house for 40 years. I've raised my daughter there, cared for my neighbors. I've never had a single citation against me. These accusations came out of nowhere after I refused to sell my home to Palisade Horizons." A ripple moved through the observers. Harriet continued, "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for fairness." Camilla's eyes stung with emotion. She felt her mother's quiet dignity radiating across the courtroom. But would it matter to Hopkins, who might already have his decision bought and paid for? At length, Hopkins nodded. "Very well. I'll take this evidence under advisement." He paused, then turned to the attorneys. "Both parties will submit final briefs in 3 days. I'll issue a ruling after reviewing them. Court is adjourned." He banged the gavel. Camilla stood, the adrenaline coursing through her, making her knees weak. Victor Hall shot her a venomous look before stalking out. Harriet sighed with relief, but Simone placed a hand on Camilla's shoulder. "We're not done," Simone murmured. "Hopkins is either going to bury this or rule against us if we don't put more pressure on him." Camilla nodded. "Then we find a way to put the spotlight on him. If he's corrupt, let's drag him into public scrutiny. He's messed with the wrong woman." As they left the courtroom, Harriet's hand trembled in Camilla's. No matter the outcome, Camilla would stand firm. Little did she know, a deeper conspiracy was about to unravel, one that would test every ounce of her resolve and threaten to tear apart the very community she fought to protect. In the days that followed, Camilla and Simone worked feverishly on their final brief. They added every detail: Harriet's impeccable records, the suspicious timing of the lawsuit, the repeated pattern of Palisade Horizons victories under Judge Hopkins. Yet as they refined their arguments, a sense of unease settled over them. Camilla noticed unmarked cars idling too long on her street. One night, while returning from a late grocery run, she caught the glint of a camera lens pointing from a parked SUV. Each time she dialed the police, the car would speed off. Harriet's phone rang with heavy silence on the other end, or with robotic-sounding threats telling her to move out or else. Unable to sleep, Camilla busied herself by scanning financial records late into the night, searching for something so concrete that Hopkins couldn't dismiss it. She discovered that Palisade Horizons had made recent donations to local politicians in Fulton County, the same officials who recommended judicial appointments. This alone wasn't illegal, but it was further evidence of an expansive network exerting influence wherever it could. One afternoon, Camilla visited Helena at a nearby diner, hoping for updates from inside the courthouse. She walked in, scanning the red vinyl booths until she spotted Helena, who looked jittery, constantly glancing at the door. "Are you all right?" Camilla asked, sliding into the booth. Helena's fingers drummed nervously on the tabletop. "I got a warning from my supervisor about improper document handling. I'm not sure if they know I've been helping you, but I have a feeling they're cracking down on staff, threatening to revoke security clearances." Camilla felt a surge of guilt. "Helena, maybe it's best you distance yourself. I don't want you to lose your job." Helena shook her head. "I can't look away while an entire community is being exploited. Just promise me if I find anything explosive, you'll use it wisely and protect my identity." Camilla reached out and squeezed Helena's hand. "Promise." She left the diner feeling both grateful and apprehensive. The consequences of continuing this fight were piling up, but so were the stakes. Back at Harriet's house, she found her mother in the living room, refolding laundry with trembling hands. Harriet looked up, concern etched into her face. "Baby, you haven't been sleeping. This is too much for one person to handle." Camilla knelt beside her mother, the laundry soft against her knees. "I'm doing this for us, Ma. For you. For everyone who can't stand up to these bullies. It's not too much. It's necessary." Harriet's lips curved into a sad smile. "I just worry. You have your whole life ahead of you. I don't want it ruined by men like Hopkins. Camilla hugged her mother gently. Don't worry about me. They have all the money, but we have the truth. In that moment, despite the swirl of dark forces, Harriet seemed reassured, but Camilla could feel the quicksand beneath her feet. Truth alone might not be enough, she thought. We need a spotlight, a megaphone, something so big they can't muzzle us. Little did she know that her desperate search for that megaphone would set off a chain of events, leading her into a labyrinth of bribes, secret bank accounts, and the heartbreak of discovering betrayal within her own circle. A scorching July sun hung over Atlanta the day Simone received an anonymous tip. She was told to investigate a series of suspicious payments made to an account possibly linked to Hopkins. The tipster claimed these payments could be traced back to Palisade Horizons. Camilla's heart raced as Simone explained over speakerphone. We don't know who called, just a modulated voice, but they mentioned a bank reference. If we can get those bank records, it might be the smoking gun we need. They agreed to meet in a quiet corner of a public library to strategize. Simone arrived first, scanning the rows of books for eavesdroppers. Camilla joined her at a secluded table, a stack of history books shielding them from view. We'll file a motion for discovery, but Hopkins will undoubtedly try to quash it, Simone said grimly. Camilla nodded. We need a plan to get these documents without giving him time to destroy evidence. Just then, Camilla's phone buzzed. It was a text from Helena. Meet me at the courthouse basement records room tomorrow, 7 p.m. A flicker of hope ignited. Helena was going to help them find something. But Camilla also felt an undercurrent of caution. If Helena was discovered, it would cost her job, possibly more. That evening, Harriet insisted on cooking dinner, despite Camilla's suggestion to order takeout. The mother-daughter pair shared a quiet meal, a comforting ritual as the storm raged around them. Their conversation veered from legalities to small talk about Harriet's crocheting patterns and local church gossip. For a moment, Camilla felt normal, protected. Later, as she settled into bed, her phone rang an unknown number. She hesitated, but answered. A crackly voice said, "Are you sure you know who your friends are?" Her stomach dropped. "Who is this?" The line went dead. Though her pulse pounded, she forced herself to remain composed. She tried to rationalize the call as another intimidation tactic from the developer's side. But the next day, she realized the cryptic question was painfully relevant. At precisely 7 p.m., Camilla slipped into the courthouse basement. A maze of fluorescent, lit corridors stretched out, each door labeled with dull plaques. She found Helena waiting outside a records room. "I got something," Helena whispered. "It's a sealed transcript." The case name was coded, but rumor is it involved a pay-to-play scandal. Might show direct involvement by Hopkins. She led Camilla inside. The air smelled of dust and old paper. Within minutes, Helena pulled out a manila folder from a locked cabinet. "Read fast. I can't let you take pictures or make copies in here," she said, pressing the folder into Camilla's hands. Camilla flipped through pages detailing depositions of an accountant from Palisade Horizons. The man admitted funneling money to a judicial official. While the name was redacted, the position matched Hopkins's role exactly. Camilla's breath caught. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Helena froze. She yanked the folder from Camilla and shoved it back in the cabinet just as the door swung open. A security guard stepped in, flanked by none other than Victor Hall. Camilla's heart thundered. How did he know we'd be here? "What are you doing down here after hours?" the guard demanded, shining a flashlight at Helena and Camilla. Hall smirked. "Yes, Miss Carter." "Looking for something?" A cold chill crawled up Camilla's spine. "Just checking public records," she said, forcing calm. "Is that a crime?" The guard eyed Helena's ID badge suspiciously. Helena held up her hands, face flushing. I was just assisting Miss Carter. She asked about an old zoning transcript. Hall gave them a once-over, then pointed at Helena. I believe your supervisor is looking for you. Let's not have unauthorized access to sealed documents. Camilla's mind scrambled. She knew if they pressed further, they'd be caught. They had no plausible reason for rummaging in sealed transcripts. We'll be leaving, Camilla said, stepping past them, her heart pounding. As they hurried out, Helena's eyes brimmed with worry. I'm sorry, Camilla, she whispered. Somebody tipped them off. Camilla nodded numbly. A traitor was in their midst, someone who knew their moves, feeding information to the enemy. The phone call's cryptic words returned to her. Are you sure you know who your friends are? Her suspicion turned in circles. Could it be someone in her own legal circle? A neighbor? Even Simone? The possibility tasted bitter. One thing was clear, the net was tightening. If they wanted to expose Hopkins, they'd have to be even more cunning. The world around Camilla felt darker than ever, but in the depths of that darkness, her resolve only hardened. She was in this fight until the end, no matter the cost. The next morning, Camilla woke to a tense atmosphere. Harriet sensed her daughter's distress, but didn't pry. Camilla knew she had to keep her mother safe by limiting how much Harriet knew about the courthouse fiasco. At her lawyer friend Simone's office, the small waiting area smelled faintly of vanilla from a burning candle. Camilla sank into a chair, her mind swirling with worries about Helena's safety, the sealed transcript, and the looming deadline for Hopkins' ruling. A few minutes later, Simone emerged, waving Camilla in. Inside, Simone closed the door and sighed heavily. I heard what happened in the records room. Camilla rubbed her temples. Hall showed up with security. How did he know we'd be there? Simone's expression turned grim. I don't know, but rumors are flying around the courthouse that Helena's under internal review for unauthorized record handling. If she gets fired, it'll be because of us. Camilla's guilt flared. I can't let that happen. She risks so much. Simone tapped her desk nervously. Hopkins will likely issue a ruling soon. We need a backup plan, a bigger stage. Like the press, Camilla nodded. Yes, if we can get a reliable journalist to shine a light on this, maybe public scrutiny will force Hopkins to back off. Simone pursed her lips. I have a contact at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a reporter named Carmen Velasquez. She's investigated political corruption before. Let me reach out. Though the plan was risky, they agreed it might be the only way. But before Simone could pick up her phone, a gentle knock sounded at her office door. Simone opened it to reveal Mr. Jackson, one of Harriet's longtime neighbors. Am I interrupting? He asked timidly. Camilla forced a smile. Not at all. What's up? He stepped inside, wringing his hands. I need to tell you something. 1. I've been in talks with some men from Palisade Horizons. They offered me a buyout, too. I refused. But last week, they approached me again. Camilla and Simone exchanged wary looks. What did they say? Simone asked. Jackson exhaled. They implied I'd face legal trouble if I didn't convince Harriet to drop her case. They even said something about forging old debts, or something that could land me in court. He lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. I told them I'd try to get Harriet to walk away. A pang of betrayal shot through Camilla. She cared about Mr. Jackson. He was like an uncle. But she also understood fear. The developers' intimidation tactics were working. It's okay, she said softly, but we need you to stand strong with us. We're so close to exposing their corruption. Mr. Jackson's voice trembled with guilt. 1. I'll do whatever I can. I just don't want them to ruin my family. You know, Camila placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We understand. Let's not turn on each other. That's exactly what they want, Simone sighed. Let's keep our circles small. The fewer people who know our exact plans, the better. As Mr. Jackson left, Camilla's phone rang. Helena's name flashed on the screen. She answered in a heartbeat. They fired me, Helena said, voice cracking. They're accusing me of accessing sealed files without authorization. My supervisor said they'll investigate further, might press charges. Camilla's chest tightened with rage and sorrow. I'm so sorry. We'll fight this. I'll testify that it was me asking for them, not you. No, Helena interrupted. That'll make you a target for perjury or conspiracy. We don't want you charged either. Just find a way to bring them down, Camilla. That's the only way we get justice. I have to go. The line went dead. Camilla set the phone down with trembling hands. A wave of despair threatened to engulf her. Good people were losing their livelihoods simply for trying to do what was right. Now more than ever, she needed a big public spotlight on Hopkins' corruption. She turned to Simone. Call Carmen Velasquez. Let's go public. 2 days passed in a blur. Simone managed to schedule a discreet meeting with Carmen Velasquez at a cozy cafe near Piedmont Park. The journalist was a respected figure in Atlanta's media scene, known for her relentless investigations and a distinct refusal to be intimidated. Camilla and Simone arrived early, choosing a table by a wide window that overlooked the bustling sidewalk. Dappled sunlight fell across their anxious faces. Soon enough, Carmen, a petite woman in a crisp blazer, strode in, scanning the cafe until she spotted them. Introductions were brief but cordial. Carmen's sharp eyes flicked between Camilla and Simone. I read the summary you emailed. If half of it's true, this could be huge. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a voice recorder. For the next hour, Camilla recounted Harriet's predicament, the suspicious lawsuits, Helena's inside information, and the sealed transcript fiasco. She recounted how the judge had consistently ruled in favor of Palisade Horizons, how threatened neighbors had been coerced, how Helena lost her job for simply pulling dockets. Carmen's face remained impassive, but her note-taking was furious. This goes beyond a local court tiff. It sounds like systemic corruption, she observed. To publish a story, I need documentation proof that ties Judge Hopkins directly to these payoffs, or at least to a pattern of wrongdoing. Camilla hesitated. They didn't have a smoking gun, but they had strong circumstantial evidence. The pattern of rulings, the anonymous tip about a bank account, the partially glimpsed, sealed transcript. Carmen tapped her pen thoughtfully. Even circumstantial evidence can ignite an investigation if presented properly. But Hopkins might deny everything and say, "You're slandering his name." Are you prepared for the blowback? A tremor ran through Camilla. She pictured Harriet losing the home they loved, Helena blacklisted from legal work, and neighbors harassed by corporate goons. Yet she also saw the alternative, doing nothing, letting a corrupt judge keep exploiting innocent people. I'm ready, Camilla said, her voice steady. Carmen smiled a little. All right, I'll dig into this. I have contacts at the courthouse, at the city planning office, and possibly even a few within Palisade Horizons. If there's dirt, we'll find it. But be careful. Once this hits the press, you'll be under a microscope. As they parted ways, Camilla felt a mix of hope and terror. The wheels were in motion, unstoppable now. Either Hopkins would be exposed, or he would bury them under legal threats and smear campaigns. Over the next few days, Carmen called or texted Camilla with updates. She'd managed to confirm some of the property rulings, even uncovering testimony from a handful of former homeowners who'd lost everything in Hopkins Court. Yet the question loomed, Where was the money trail? Camilla's final hearing date loomed as well. Despite the story not yet being published, word got around that a journalist was sniffing around. The tension escalated in the neighborhood. Harriet reported strangers prowling around the block, speaking to neighbors, possibly trying to dig up dirt on Camilla. Miss S. Washington described an unsettling visit from a survey team that grilled her about Harriet's mental health. Late one evening, Camilla sat with Harriet in the living room. The old floor fan rattled on high, trying to fend off the sticky summer air. Harriet handed Camilla a glass of iced tea. "I'm proud of you, baby," Harriet said softly. "No matter what happens, you stood up for what's right." Camilla's throat tightened. She recalled the cherished memories of her father reading bedtime stories in that same living room, the countless Thanksgiving dinners, the legacy they were fighting to protect. "It's not just us," Camilla murmured, wiping a tear. "So many families are being driven out of their homes. We have to make this count." Harriet nodded, her eyes misty. Then she prayed quietly for a moment, her words simple but profound, asking for strength and justice. Camilla listened, lulled by her mother's unwavering faith. Outside, a car slowed, its headlights briefly illuminating the window before rolling on. Camilla's nerves tensed. She set her jaw, steeling herself. Let them watch. Let them threaten. Soon the entire city would hear the truth. And once the truth found the light, it would be impossible to hide again. On the morning of Harriet's final hearing, storm clouds gathered over Atlanta, mirroring the mood that hung in the air. Gusts of wind rattled the old oak trees along the Carter family's street. Harriet wore a black skirt suit, nervous but resolved, while Camilla chose a subdued pantsuit, her hair neatly pinned back. Together, they stepped into Camilla's sedan and drove downtown. Outside the courthouse, a cluster of reporters snapped photos as they walked by. Carmen was there, offering a curt nod, no doubt collecting last-minute details for her upcoming article. Camilla caught a glimpse of Victor Hall looking tense. He was fielding questions from reporters about allegations of improper lawsuits. The swirl of rumors clearly weighed on him. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick enough to taste. Judge Hopkins took his seat, expression unreadable. Camilla noticed sweat beading on his forehead. Simone sat beside Harriet, posture rigid with anticipation. "Be seated," Hopkins intoned, rapping his gavel. "We're here to finalize the matter of Harriet Carter versus Palisade Horizons. Both sides have submitted briefs." After reviewing the evidence, he paused, letting the silence draw out. "It's time for closing statements." Victor Hall rose, a coiled energy behind his eyes. He launched into a well-rehearsed narrative. Harriet Carter's property was indeed out of compliance. The defense had resorted to conspiracy theories, and none of the allegations against Judge Hopkins or Palisade Horizons held water. It was all a farce, he insisted, orchestrated by desperate individuals unwilling to follow the law. Camilla's fists clenched under the table. The gall of Hall's performance felt surreal. When Hall finally wrapped up, Simone stood, exhaling before speaking calmly. She reiterated every piece of factual evidence supporting Harriet's full compliance: official city inspection reports, receipts for repairs, multiple testimonies from neighbors. Then she broached the subject of Palisade Horizons. "With all due respect to this court," Simone said, her voice resonating, "we must acknowledge a pattern of lawsuits targeting homeowners in historically black neighborhoods. The same developer, the same law firm, the same judge, over and over again. This is no coincidence." Hopkins shifted. "Miss Russell, keep your commentary to the specifics of Miss Carter's case." Simone nodded respectfully. "Understood, Your Honor. But Harriet Carter's case does not exist in a vacuum. We believe the plaintiff's actions, and potentially others, are part of a strategy to gentrify entire communities through legal intimidation. The courtroom murmured. Camilla dared a glance at Carmen, who scribbled notes feverishly from the gallery. At last, Simone wrapped up, and Hopkins stiffly announced he would retire to his chambers to finalize the ruling. The bailiff instructed everyone to remain seated. Camilla's heart thundered. This moment felt like a precarious cliff's edge. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes ticked by, each second heavy with possibility. A few spectators whispered among themselves, uncertain. Camilla's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Harriet could be forced to pay crippling fines or lose the home. She prayed that the swirling rumors of corruption, now partially exposed, might force Hopkins to act impartially or at least to avoid a blatantly unjust ruling under the watchful eye of the press. Finally, the door to Hopkins' chambers opened. He returned, robe billowing. His expression was grim. "The court has reviewed all submissions and evidence," he began, voice low. "While the plaintiff has provided certain grounds for concern regarding the property's compliance." He paused, eyes drifting to Harriet. "I find those concerns to be insufficient to warrant the remedies sought by the plaintiff." A wave of relief rolled through Camilla, Harriet, and Simone. But the tension wasn't over. Hopkins leveled a steely glare. Therefore, the first rule in favor of the defendant, Harriet Carter. "However, my ruling does not condone wild accusations against the court or the plaintiff. If any party continues to pursue these defamatory claims, they may face legal consequences." He banged his gavel sharply, signaling the end. Camilla struggled to process the conflicting emotions: triumph for Harriet, outrage at Hopkins' thinly veiled threat. Harriet squeezed Camilla's hand, tears glistening. The neighbors who had come to watch broke into hushed applause. Victor Hall looked furious, but his client's case had just been dismissed. He stalked out of the courtroom with shoulders rigid. Moments later, Carmen approached, snapping photos, rattling off questions. Simone skillfully handled the press, praising Harriet's innocence while carefully sidestepping direct accusations about Hopkins' corruption. Camilla's phone buzzed. Another unknown number texted, "You won this round. Watch your step." She felt a chill. Even with the court victory, they were far from safe. But in that instant, Harriet was free from the lawsuit. The house was saved. Camilla embraced her mother in the corridor, letting tears of relief flow. Little did they know, as the storm outside broke into a torrential downpour, the real fury was just beginning. Because Carmen's story was about to drop, and karma had a way of storming into the lives of those who believed they were untouchable. Within 24 hours, Carmen's explosive article went live on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's website, splashing across social media platforms and even garnering coverage on local TV news. The headline read, "Pattern of questionable rulings links Judge Hopkins to real estate exploitation." Carmen's piece was thorough, referencing the cases, the suspicious circumstances, and even quoting Helena anonymously about sealed records and intimidation within the courthouse. Atlanta lit up with controversy. Talk radio hosts debated the story. Local activists demanded investigations, and social media buzzed with calls to remove Hopkins from the bench. While the article didn't offer the absolute smoking gun of bribes, it painted a damning portrait. On a quiet Sunday morning, Harriet made breakfast while Camilla scrolled through the avalanche of online reactions. "People are furious," Camilla said, half in awe. "Several families mention losing their homes. They're all telling their stories." Harriet placed scrambled eggs and toast before her daughter, beaming with pride. "You did it. You stood up to them." But just as Camilla took a bite, her phone rang Simone's caller ID. She answered to an excited voice. "Camilla, you won't believe this." A junior accountant from Palisade Horizons just contacted me. He says he has proof of direct payments to a holding company in Hopkins' wife's name. He wants to come forward in exchange for whistleblower protections. Camilla nearly dropped her fork. That could blow this wide open. By midday, Camilla, Simone, and the accountant, who introduced himself as David Reed, gathered in Simone's small office. David's hands shook as he pulled out files from a worn briefcase. I can't live with this anymore. These spreadsheets show transactions from Palisade Horizons to Lakemont Enterprises, which is owned by Judge Hopkins' wife, Carla Hopkins. They're labeled as consulting fees, but no such consulting work exists. Simone's eyes widened, rifling through the pages. This is exactly what we need. Camilla felt a rush of vindication and a pang of fear. Thank you, David, but you're taking a risk here. He hung his head. I know, but I can't watch them ruin lives for profit. Countless families lost their homes. It's blood money. They wasted no time passing the documents to Carmen, who was ecstatic about the potential follow-up story. Meanwhile, the Georgia Judicial Inquiry Commission announced an emergency review of Judge Hopkins' rulings and finances. Events cascaded quickly. Subpoenas were issued, investigators opened official probes, and TV crews camped outside Hopkins' home. As the onslaught of scrutiny mounted, Hopkins' facade crumbled. He released a statement denying all allegations, but the evidence was too damning. Within a week, the Judicial Inquiry Commission recommended that Hopkins be suspended pending a full investigation. For Camilla and Harriet, it felt surreal to watch a once untouchable man face the consequences of his own greed. But the story didn't end there. Palisade Horizons senior executives scrambled to distance themselves from the bribery scandal, while the local district attorney's office hinted at criminal charges for everyone involved in the scheme. On a warm Friday afternoon, with the sun shining brilliantly, Harriet tended to her rose bushes, while Camilla scrolled through news updates on her phone. The headline read, "Judge Hopkins resigns. Amid bribery allegations, Palisade Horizons, executives under fire." Camilla exhaled, tears gathering in her eyes. Karma had arrived, swift and merciless, for those who believed themselves above the law. From a single dubious summons to a scandal that shook the entire city, Camilla Carter's fight for her mother's home became a lightning rod for justice. Armed with sheer determination and the truth, she challenged a powerful judge, exposed hidden bribes, and inspired a community to stand against systematic exploitation. It was never just about saving one house. It was about defending the dignity and history of an entire neighborhood. If this incredible story of courage and perseverance moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us shed light on more real-life battles and uplifting tales. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dramatic reveal, because when good people refuse to stay silent, even the mightiest powers can fall. Thank you for watching, and remember, the fight for justice starts when ordinary voices speak up and never back down.